Good evening. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon which we host our celebration this evening and pay our respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the land on which we meet tonight, and also pay our respects to any elders past or present who may be with us. As a teaching association, I'd also like to pay particular respect to the manner in which Aboriginal peoples have kept and developed their culture across the generations and looked after their children and kept knowledges alive within Aboriginal people's custodianship of land and country. Welcome. Welcome everybody. Television, what can we do about it? I sensed how much everyone wished that went much, much slower, especially when the visuals of all the titles came up, and it will be on our website and we might slow it down a little bit, but under tonight's cracking pace, we had to push on through. But I heard and I felt and I joined in with your frustration. It's a very happy night, and it's with great pride and an enormous sense of privilege that I stand before you on this particular evening as PETAA President. And if I have any wish at all for this evening, it's that we take advantage of such a rare occasion to meet and for old friends to meet, not old in the age sense of the word. I mean, for good friends and colleagues to meet and reacquaint, and also for people that don't know the enormous history of PETAA or who have come to PETAA more recently, that they also get a chance to introduce themselves to people whose involvement has been longer than their own. It is a really special evening. I in particular am very mindful that there are decades of passionate commitment and work in this room, work done in the field of English teaching, literacies education, initial teacher education, and ongoing professional learning for teachers. Later on in the evening, PETAA, another PETAA, will speak a little more on PETA's specific contribution to some of those frameworks. And Mark McLeod will speak around literature, which leaves my role really to speak quite generally, I think. It's very moving seeing that presentation, to feel both slightly insignificant in the here and now and also part of a much wider, longer tradition. And although we're here to celebrate PETA's 40th anniversary, I think that enormous list makes me see and appreciate how much good work happens, of course, outside of professional associations, and not just within schools. That it's a very broad field within which PETAA operates. And also, having said that, it's probably also appropriate to note within that the enormous conceptual breadth of work that PETAA has done and the longevity with which it has done its work. Although 40 years, 1972 seems like an arbitrary date to me when I see work that was done in 1962. And so I think that if I'm going to speak around anything generally, it's going to be around the categories of change and continuity. We are here to celebrate PETAA, but PETAA also enjoys a very good relationship with some sister associations, in particular the Australian Literacy Educators Association, ATESOL, the Australian Professional Teachers Association, and I guess within the context of PETA's specific history coming out of the English Teachers Association of New South Wales, the Australian Association of Teachers of English, or the NATE as it was known then. And having shared the floor for 30 seconds with our other professional associations, tonight is about PETAA. So let me take back the mantle. So I had this feeling on the one hand that PETAA, that the idea of an origin in 1972 is maybe a fluid origin. But it is nice to have a narrative and a story of a beginning. And I was aware that in 1972, Ron Brooks received a manuscript of a book that began late one night for no particular reason. Something stirred in the black mud at the bottom of Barclays Creek. And of course, for those in the know, Barclays Creek is slang for ETA, New South Wales. And the black creature that was stirring there was none other than Peter. I'm sorry that Gordon Winch couldn't be here this evening as the first president of PETAA. It would have been a lovely moment, and Gordon was going to come, and only sent his apologies this morning when he became unwell. But back in 1972, and I am willing to stand corrected, there are 4 names that arise, and Paul was certainly involved, but the 4 names that are always spoken about are Gordon Winch, Bob Walsh, Sister Mary Augustine Nolan, and Stuart Lee, who I think ended up as the assistant principal. I knew there'd be a call at that moment. Assistant principal at Sydney Teachers College. And Stuart wrote in that very first publication, the journal that appeared in 1974, that the objectives of the association was, of course, to keep its members up to date, and it would also be the body which would represent its members and offer input. It's very clear to me at that stage the idea of PETAA was specifically to input into syllabus reform and curriculum cycles. It seems to me that that field has changed fundamentally over the years, and now PETA's input happens in a much broader range of forum, in particular around the whole notion of quality teaching itself and pedagogy, which is to immediately raise the spectre of standards and standards over career thresholds. If there has been a standard that PETAA has been involved with over the years, the standard, it seems to me, has always been around a particular quality of thought. PETAA has always placed value on children's thoughts and valued children's speech, perhaps most powerfully articulated in those early years around the agency of children writing. PETAA has also resisted perceptions of teaching as an instrumental act, and it's entered into, I think very courageously and very honestly and wholeheartedly, into a series of ongoing conversations about change in practice or change in teaching practice. And what strikes me, looking at what has been a very selected list of ministerial policy statements, national and state inquiries, landmark conference presentations, what strikes me is how much teachers have been asked to change. That change is a part of teachers' lives. There is a poem, and I think I've actually quoted it once before, but only in part in one of my newsletters, but it is a poem that, to me, it's a beautifully palindromic poem by Bertolt Brecht around the mutability and the irrevocability of change. It's called Everything Changes. You can make a fresh start with your final breath, but what has happened, and the water you once poured into the wine cannot be drained off again. But teachers are resilient. Brecht goes on. He's not speaking about teachers. But I'm not adverse to quarrying a good poem for a good occasion. What has happened. The water you once poured into the wine cannot be drained off again. But everything changes, and you can make a fresh start with your final breath. It's a beautiful poem to read because it goes in and then back out. And you're kind of left there. Teachers are always making fresh starts, though hopefully not always with their final breaths. But each year is a fresh start for a fresh group of children. Each day is a fresh start. Fresh starts are made in learning sequences that begin. In Auden's words, we are history-making creatures obliged at every moment to transcend what we were a moment before. That's true. Change is a part of very much what we do, but there's also a robust quality of hope around the Teaching Act that I think doesn't change. And what doesn't change is what we believe, what PETAA believes, around small happenings in great rooms, which is my description of a classroom. And what we believe is that reading is an act of contemplation, and learning and writing are fundamentally creative acts, and teaching is an act of both courage and community. I'll let our other speakers speak more fully on specific matters later on. Thank you.